Okay, everybody, we are with Annie. Annie is a little BC Wildie. She is about 1.5. A BC Wildie is like a Canadian Mustang, if we must think about it in terms that a lot of people do understand. She's come from a range somewhere here in British Columbia, Canada, a little to the east, and rescued her about half a year ago when she was rounded up with another 7 or 8 or so of her friends. And she was one of the ones that people didn't want, and she was going to go back. So we took her. Now, I want to talk about Groundwork because there's been a lot of discussions. I put a few videos up over in the membership area. If you're part of that, you've seen it. If not, don't worry. We're going to cover a lot of Groundwork stuff in these videos as well. But in the case of the membership one, there's some additional sort of subscriber-based stuff where it's like subscribing to a magazine. You just get a little bit more. So Annie has had some Groundwork practice with me. And I didn't want to go too far because I really wanted to sort of demonstrate where we can get to. Now, I'm only holding this as a thing that you can use. I'm not going to use it, but I want to talk about it. But before we talk about tools, we want to talk about drive and draw. And you've probably heard these terms before, especially if you're a subscriber here. But right now I have draw. Annie wants to be with me. If I leave in time, she will come. And I won't need to pull on her. Okay, so that's what we call draw. When a horse goes where you go, where you leave a spot, they replace it. Essentially, they want to be with you, they want to touch, they want to play, they want to do whatever it takes to just be with you. So even if I didn't have the lead, I'm not going to pull on it. You can see her nose is already coming. She'll just kind of wander on with me. I shouldn't have to hold this lead rope in any way other than to kind of keep it off the ground, in any way that forces her to be with me, and that would be draw. Now that said, if I did pull her along, we're still looking at a draw behavior because they're, as I said, they're replacing the place where we were at, they were following along, they are coming with us. So that should define draw. And it's really important to define the terms that we use in a very objective way. You can very clearly see that if I leave and I don't drag her, she just comes, and that is draw. If she were to go elsewhere, then it means I don't have draw, and she doesn't want to be with me. So, drive is where we tell a horse to leave a space that they're at, and we either go with them or we don't go with them. So a backup exercise is drive. So if I ask Annie to leave me and say back up, that's drive. If I take our tool, which I'll talk about in a minute, and I shake it around like so, that's drive. Okay, because I'm asking Annie to leave and now I'll draw. Say, Annie, please come here. A little more. And that's draw. So drive is an exercise that we do from the ground, but we primarily do from the saddle. So we want to connect these later. So you have to think about drive and draw when we're riding, because the purpose of all groundwork should be that we make a connection on the ground to the saddle. Otherwise, that doesn't seem, in my mind, it doesn't seem like there's a good point to doing groundwork. Other than maybe possibly getting a horse through or past something. Okay, so I've got a lot of draw. Annie's coming into my space and I'm moving. Okay, so she's almost driving me because I'm leaving as she comes in. She instigated the movement and I moved. So it's also very important not only to know what we're doing with the horse, but what they're doing with us. So if I come in front of her and she looks like she wants to nibble on my rope or my hand and I step, she could very well be driving me around because I'm leaving. But then, of course, when I go to leave, she's going to draw. She's such a cutie. Just gave her a bath, so she's all clean and kind of shiny. Of course, it attracts a few of the flies for the moisture, but Annie doesn't seem to be too bothered by it. Although she is shedding her summer coat pretty good. Doesn't matter how much I brush her. Okay, so now that we've got draw and drive sorted out, and how we do it to the horse and how they might do it to us, because we're constantly drawn to them as well. I will constantly come up and I'll just pet and I'll touch. That means Annie has draw for me. Okay, so this is the very basics of groundwork, very basic concepts of groundwork and how we're going to work with a horse. The purpose, I'll repeat again, the purpose of groundwork is to do things that are going to make sense later on when we're riding. Now, draw doesn't have a lot, but it does have, like in this case, it has some when we go to turn. When we turn a horse, when we're riding, we want to think about not pulling, but actually sort of inviting them into a turn. So we're going to think a lot about that as we go about doing this work today. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is tools. I've made this just now. It doesn't matter what you use. You do not have to buy some expensive flag thing. This is literally a dollar store little fluffy thing that kids use on top of a stick. I think this is a dressage whip. I don't know, I don't remember where I got it, but I got it and I thought, you know, I just need something that has a handle. So I zap strap this thing on and this makes my flappy thing that I could use. Now, why would you use one of these? Some people are really against the idea that you got to use a flag or something like that to get things going. But some people, and it's totally cool, that you're just no good with your rope. It takes a lot of work because what we'll end up doing is swinging it. And so the two tools that we can use for groundwork are a stick and a flag or some shaky thing, some flappy thing, and our rope. And I really encourage you, if you're into horses, get really good at controlling your rope. Enough that you can make it still as well. Because being still is just as important as being busy. Okay, because we certainly don't have one of these sticks around and we're just naturally just sort of flapping it and stuff. And that would be the equivalent of what we're doing with our rope. Now, the equivalent that we can make, come here, Annie. Come on. Good girl. See, a little bit of draw. It's required a bit of encouragement because it's worrisome. She doesn't want to be trapped with all these flappy things. The equivalent that we can think of this is like a horse's tail. So when a horse is unhappy with another horse, they'll flick that tail pretty quick. They're unhappy with you, they'll flick their tail pretty quick. I don't know if Annie will do it to me if I go and touch some part of her body that will bother her. Not much bothers Annie. She's actually been really good to work with. But essentially what will happen is their tail will go flick and you'll get a tail to the face. It's uncomfortable. I've had quite a few. And so we kind of think about it like that. Like if my tail, if I'm walking along and I'm just doing this with my rope, if I'm constantly shaking it, it's inaccurate. And what we actually want, I mean, you can do that, of course. But what we want to happen is when I flick this, Annie should have a think. What is it that I want? Because that's what they do to other horses to get them to do something. Right? So if we can keep this still, because everything matters, doing something, doing nothing, it all counts. And what we want to be able to do is be really quiet with our horses. So if we're constantly loud and just constantly doing something, you know, it's concerning. Why? Because I'm usually very quiet. So if you're quiet, your loud is loud. If you're always loud, your quiet is nothing and your loud becomes the quiet. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so we've covered a pile of bits and pieces of basics of hanging around with horses and doing groundwork. And we got drive, we've got draw, we've got the two tools of the trade that are most common, the flag or flappy thing or stick or whatever. I mean, it really is just something that sort of brings about some energy. You know, I don't even have any direction to this. I am just doing it beside her. So because there's no direction, Annie's going to just try to leave because it's a bit of a worry. Not that she's actually worried about it, because her and I have done a selection of stuff over time, and I can touch her all over. And this is imperative as well. Your driving tool should not be the enemy. This shouldn't be something that is used in a vigorous way that causes concern. If you do use your driving tool to cause a lot of concern, then you'll want to fix it. You want to say, hey, I'm sorry, I had to do so much. I really just want you to get moving along. And then if you get something to happen, then the next time you go to do it, it should be quieter. We should be ready to go, but she isn't. So I might pick that up. I might say, this is what I wanted. Thanks a lot, okay? So just talking about tools, say, okay, thank you. And understanding that if you are flapping this thing around anything beyond 30 minutes of working with it, you're doing too much and you need to stop and reset and get it to where the things we ask for mean something before we have to get loud. So I'll get loud and then I'll get quiet. I'll ask her to stop. Because it isn't the flappy thing, it isn't the tool, the driving tool that we want them to go with. If you have to drive your horse around through sheer drive, we probably have a problem.